Hi, I'm Tina Craig of Seaside Stitches. Today I'd like to introduce you to my Wonder Window technique for fussy cutting any shape for English paper piecing. Today I'm using 1-inch jewel shapes. These are pre-cut paper templates for English paper piecing. I need a piece of cardstock and I'm going to trace my jewel shape onto this cardstock and then cut out the center. So that I have this. So now I have an opening for my jewel. I also need a sheet of plastic. This is a 12 gauge upholstery vinyl, and I'm going to tape that along one edge. And that's going to create a hinge. One last step before I start using my Wonder Window, I'm going to add a dot in each corner of the shape with a permanent marker right on the vinyl. And now my Wonder Window is complete and ready to use. The first example I'd like to show you today is a simple repeating motif. Here I have a floral motif that's repeated 6 times. So my goal is to cut out exactly the same shape all 6 times. Today I'm working with a bird print. And I've used this a few times already, so I've started to create some Swiss cheese here. Fussy cutting does use up a lot of extra fabric. So I'm going to use my Wonder Window to audition different shapes. So I don't have enough of this bird left. So I could use this one or this one. I think I'm going to cut this one today. So I need a dry erase marker now. I'm going to trace the bird onto the vinyl or whatever clear plastic you have handy with a dry erase marker. So I like to have some of these motifs that actually touch the edge of the shape, and that will help me line up the rest of the birds later on. And now before I move this, I'm going to take my water-soluble glue pen, put a little bit of glue on the back of one of the jewel templates, and now I'm going to lift just the plastic and I'll drop in a jewel right into the opening. Now I can lift my Wonder Window and look for another copy of that same bird. And there it is, and I can line up the tracing that I did earlier, lift just the plastic, and drop in another template. Now I can repeat that process until I have all 6 templates placed. Then I'm going to cut these shapes out with a pair of scissors. I usually use scissors for these because I can just cut exactly what I need. And I'm going to give myself 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. That extra little bit beyond the 1/4 inch will help me later on. If you're not quite sure what that 3/8 inch looks like, you can, of course, put a ruler next to it and measure that 3/8 inch or rotary cut if you prefer. So I'll glue base just this one so you can see what this is going to look like. I draw a light line of glue near the edge of the paper, but not directly on the edge. And then I roll the seam allowance over the edge of the paper and press it down into the glue. I usually work my way around clockwise. This pointy corner is going to create a little tail. Just leave the tail there. Please don't cut it off. And I'll just put a little dab of glue there on that last side and roll that over. And now I have a perfectly basted 1-inch jewel shape ready to be stitched. Here are a couple other examples of a simple repeating motif. There's a lemur with the tails coming together in the center and some tulip pink flowers and some more birds. Next, let's take a look at a symmetrical motif. Here it is again in a different colorway. When I'm working with symmetrical motifs, I like to add some hash marks, parallel lines across my paper so that I can match up motifs from side to side along the seam lines that are going to touch each other when these shapes come together. So in this case, here's the motif that I'd like to use. I've added a hash mark halfway across this top edge so I can place the center of this motif. And I can see that this darker green curved line hits the same hash mark on both sides. So when they come together along these seam lines, it's a continuous line all the way around and it creates a kaleidoscope effect. Here we have a couple other examples of symmetrical motifs. This print is a chevron stripe and it creates really interesting patterns when the shapes come together. The magic of the Wonder Window really happens with mirror image motifs. So let's take a look at this tulip pink macaw print where we have some birds looking to the left and some looking to the right. So I'm going to place my Wonder Window on one of these birds. And draw around. Without moving this paper, I'm going to lift just the plastic, drop a template into the opening. Now I can lift the Wonder Window, and to find the mirror image, I'm going to flip the plastic to the other side. Now you can see the reason why I added those dots in the corners. If I hadn't taped this exactly right, I might have to adjust just a little bit to make sure those dots are still in the corners. Now I can look for the bird that's looking in the other direction, line up the traced lines, lift the window, lift the plastic, drop a template in the opening, and now I've got one bird looking in each direction. So as soon as I lift the Wonder Window, I'll be able to see if I have enough seam allowance in between these two shapes. And this is just enough here. If these were any closer together than that, I would have to look for another bird somewhere else. But this is going to be just enough. So let me show you another example of a mirror image repeat. So in this case, these two motifs came together pretty well in the center, but these two are not. So in this case, this is off by enough that it's visible. So I would undo the glue basting on this shape and scooch it down just a little bit. So I should have enough seam allowance so that I can make that adjustment. And then when I sew these together, they should match up a little better than this. The last example I have here is pattern matching. So sometimes a motif is too big to fit inside one single shape, but it will fit across two shapes. And in this case, let me focus this for you. I have stitched a seam right down the middle of that butterfly, and it matches just right. In this case, I'm going to need to make a double window. So I'm going to take two jewels and put them next to each other on this cardstock. And you can tape these together if it helps to trace around them. And then trace around this double shape. And you may have noticed that when two jewels come together, they make a heart. So then when I cut that out and add my plastic, I've got a double jewel window or a heart-shaped window. Okay, so now I'm going to work with a squirrel print. And this is my double window. And I'll line up my squirrel, draw around. I'll add some branches and leaves here to help me line everything up. And I think I could use a little bit on this bottom edge as well. Maybe one more. Okay, so now before I move that paper, I'm going to drop in half of this squirrel. So I'm just going to drop a template in to the top half. And now I can lift my window and look for another squirrel. And now I just need the bottom half of this squirrel. So even though I've already cut away some of this fabric, that's okay because I only need half of this squirrel. And one more template. And this one will go on the bottom half. And then I'll cut those out again with 3/8 inch seam allowance, and that will be enough. So if I need to tweak those just a little bit, I can. So let's take a look at a couple other options for pattern matching. I have a different squirrel from that same print. Here's the macaw again, spread across two jewels. And this is two different colorways of the same print. Here's a scallop print and two different colorways of that scallop. And so I'll just show you that when I stitch these together, when I stitch together these jewels, I lift the tail from one so that I'm just stitching the folded edge underneath the tail. Let's see. Right there. So I just lift this tail out of the way and stitch underneath it. And I'll do the same thing with this tail when I stitch something to this edge. And I never trim those. If they're all spinning in the same direction, they come together beautifully in the center. Let's take a look at one. Here's the center of this one, and you can see once it's given a little press, they're all spinning in the same direction, and it's nice and flat in the center. So as I mentioned, I do use this technique for all kinds of shapes. So here's a standard 1-inch hexagon, and here's the repeating hexagon with a symmetrical motif. And you can see how this creates a little secondary design when these come together around the edge. And I've got some jewels here. Here's my bird. I've got some other shapes in here, not necessarily all fussy cut, but I've got some parallelograms and triangles and big diamonds and little diamonds and all the different shapes that play well together with a 1-inch hexagon. And these are the shapes that we use in my EPP design party class. Here is a 1-inch honeycomb shape that's used in the Patchwork of the Crosses design by Lucy Boston. And these blocks are a great opportunity for fussy cutting. Lots of opportunities for symmetrical designs and mirror image designs in these neighboring shapes. So this is a really fun block for fussy cutting. And here's my wonder window for my 1-inch honeycomb shape. Since I started doing so much fussy cutting, I am looking at fabric differently. It's a great idea to bring your Wonder Windows shopping with you when you're looking for fabric for a specific project. And then I can see what is going to work and what might not. So all of these are going to be really fun for fussy cutting. I especially love mirror image animals. If you are ready to give the Wonder Window a try, I have a free PDF download on my website of 1-inch jewel shapes. And I hope you have fun fussy cutting with the Wonder Window.